Today we are working on a 2003 Honda Civic LX 4-door. This is doing the timing belt job as well as the cam seals and crank seals for oil. At the same time, you're going to be doing a valve cover gasket job. You may be replacing your accessory belts for your alternator, power steering pump, and AC condenser. As well, in the timing belt process, you're going to be installing a new water pump and tensioner. So the first step of all this is to get your car in a nice spot to do a lot of this tear down. You're going to check up the car. You're going to get the front driver wheel off, which is going to give you access to the driver's side wheel well area. There's usually a cover right here that blocks the view of the crank bolt and crank pulley, which looks like that. There's your crank pulley, and notice that this crank pulley has a 6-pointed hold hole, unlike the early 90s generation. So what you're going to do is you're going to need to undo that crank bolt. This is going to be one of the most challenging things of doing timing on any of these Honda vehicles, or generally any timing setup, is getting the crank bolt off. What I ended up doing, which is usually my go-to, as I used a 700 foot-pound electric impact wrench. I used some air tools as well, and it really wasn't budging, so I PB blasted it with WD-40 blue torch as well. Torched the bolt head with a propane torch, and then I took a jack stand, one of my jack stands back there, and I brought it out to about here, so I have access outside of the wheel well. I took two half-inch 9x extensions with a 19mm socket to undo the crank bolt. Set it on up in there, and that's what you're going to need to undo the bolt. As well, I suggest, as it makes it very easy, the dampener holding tool looks like this. You can pick it up at Autozone, O'Reilly's, Napa, either buy or rent. It says $40 to rent or free if you return it from Autozone. It's a half drive. You take this, and it sits right into the pulley in that hole, and use that to hold the crank still while you undo the bolt. Makes it really easy. I just stuck a breaker bar on the damper holding tool, stuck it against the ground so it couldn't rotate. I took my two 9-inch extensions and grabbed my other 18-inch breaker bar, and then used a 5-foot steel pole. Lots of leverage. And I set both those on my jack stand right here, so there wasn't any ability for it to slip out downwards. And then I just wrenched on it until it came free. That took about 30 seconds or so after all that, but I'd already spent at least 15-20 minutes cranking on it with other tools. Pardon my voice. So once you get that bolt off, once you don't have to take it off, you just need to break it loose so you know you're going to be able to do the rest of this procedure. You're going to come up to the top. You need to take out the alternator. If you don't know how to take out the alternator, it's pretty straightforward. There's a large bolt on the top that goes through this hole. It is a 14mm bolt. It holds it in place up here at the top. As well on the bottom, this one has a wing nut attachment down towards the bottom, on its bottom side. You need to undo that so you can loosen the holding bolt that holds that wing nut. It's a 12mm. Once you get all three of those undone, specifically take out the lower bolt, and the upper bolt is long enough that it can't slide out. It pushes against this, but it's enough to get the alternator to lift up and out. I haven't attached it. I didn't see any need to. So I just have it sitting there unbolted. And then you need to, before that, you need to undo the power steering pump, I guess. A little ahead of myself. Power steering pump is two 12mm bolts that hold it in at the top. Those will be pretty obvious to take out. Take out your reservoir, the red cap over here. Set those both aside. The hoses, let them just lay up on top of the engine. Make sure you're not spilling fluid. You're also going to need to be undoing your valve cover. 5 10mm nuts hold it on top. 4 10mm nuts hold in your spark plug coils. Take out the nuts on all of those. You undo the 2 extra nuts that sit on these guys, 10mm as well. Those come out, you pop those up off the valve cover, and the valve cover should come off. Granted, it was probably stuck with the RTV that's on there, so you're going to have to pry on it to get to come up. You'll also, in the process, disconnect this hose. It just came off automatically when I pulled up on it. So that gives you access to the timing cover like this, and the lower cover. They have various 10mm bolts on them. There'll be one located at the front and one located at the back, right there. And then there'll be one right below your little plug for the cam position sensor. You need to unplug that as well. And then down below there'll be one to the back side of the crank, one to the front side of the crank, one just above there, and there should be one more, I thought. Oh yeah, there's one right at the connection between the 2 of them. I'm pretty sure that's the overlap one, actually. So you get all those off. Once the crank pulley's off, which takes some wiggling, and there's a shear key down there, and then all that comes apart, and then it comes undone. Basically, you also need to remove the cam pulley, 12mm. I suggest an impact wrench of some kind. It made it really easy. Slides right off. You need to then stab through your old oil seal. I just stabbed mine with a screwdriver and pulled it out. It is pretty easy to get off. There's also a little bolt tucked behind your pulley. You can see it right there. You'd undo that one too. It takes off the cover to get the gasket off.